The plate shattered on the table. I never thought that sound would stay with me this long. The smell of soybean stew still lingered in the air, and the mark of my husband's hand burned on my cheek. My in-laws sat in silence, their eyes heavy with judgment, and I couldn't say a word. As I touched my face with the same hands that had cared for others. All my life, tears came bitter yet somehow freeing. I had endured, I had broken, and that day, I made a promise to myself. I would never again live by someone else's permission. Let me tell you how it all began. You're listening to Silver Story Tree, where the voices of life's late chapters gently bloom again. Subscribe, like, and turn on the bell to hear more heartfelt stories that grow with time. I woke to the sound of monsoon rain tapping against the balcony window. During dinner time, the scent of kimchi soup wafted through the kitchen and tickled my nose. The living room clock chimed 6, its sound reaching all the way to the kitchen. Today was the end of the month, when my in-laws would gather. My mother-in-law sat on the sofa watching television, as always. At 88, her back remained straight and her voice clear. Despite qualifying for level 3 nursing care, her voice still carried authority when it came to household matters. Anju, bring out some more side dishes. I bowed my head at my mother-in-law's words and headed toward the kitchen. The word, yes, automatically escaped my lips. It was a habit formed over more than 20 years. When I opened the refrigerator door, the sharp smell of radish kimchi stung my nose. My sister-in-law Missian opened the front door and entered. Her position as a beauty salon director was evident even in her gait. Despite being in her late 40s, she always dressed in the latest fashion. Brother, did you check the bank account? My husband Do-hyun's face hardened at Missian's words. Working as a night taxi driver, he always looked tired. Today he seemed especially exhausted. He just stared down at his rice bowl with his haggard face. I brought the radish kimchi to the table on a plate. I could feel my sister-in-law's sharp gaze. 10 years of living together in this apartment in Bucheon. Jungdong suddenly felt heavier. Mother, I heard your hospital bills increased this month? I asked carefully as I placed the food on the table. The costs for my mother-in-law's long-term care were steadily increasing. Suddenly, a heavy silence descended upon the table. My mother-in-law put down her chopsticks and spoke. Enduring as a daughter-in-law is your duty. With this one sentence, the atmosphere at the table grew colder. I heard my sister-in-law clicking her tongue. My husband let out a tired sigh. Mom's medication costs have gone up a lot. I think we need to contribute more. At Missian's words, my husband raised his head. His eyes were filled with anxiety and irritation. He seemed uncomfortable discussing this in front of everyone. Our living expenses are already tight. My voice trembled slightly. The salary I earned as a caregiver wasn't much. The steam from the kimchi soup was disappearing. Missian said in a cold voice, "You could just work more, sister-in-law." My hand holding the chopsticks trembled. Even at 68, working all day at a nursing home wasn't easy. Something hot rose in my throat, but I deliberately suppressed it. Seems our daughter-in-law finds it difficult to care for her mother-in-law. My mother-in-law's words stuck like thorns. What could I say in rebuttal at this point? Mother, that's not what I meant. I couldn't finish my sentence. My sister-in-law's piercing gaze bore through me. I kept my eyes fixed on my rice bowl and took a spoonful. If there's not enough money, you should make up the difference. My husband's voice suddenly rose. I looked up, startled. His eyes were filled with anger. Do-hyun, what are you? Before I could finish, it happened. Slap. My husband's palm struck my cheek forcefully. A ringing sound filled my ears. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law continued eating without showing any surprise. As if this wasn't the first time. The spoon fell from my hand onto the table. The metallic sound reverberated throughout the living room. No one said anything. My cheek burned, but I didn't cry. Instead, I took 3 deep breaths. 1, 2, 3. I got up from the table and headed to the kitchen. My eyes suddenly caught the small voice recorder in the drawer. It was a gift from my daughter Ji-yoon a few months ago. Just in case, Mom, keep it with you. That night, I didn't close the drawer. At 5 in the morning, the alarm pierced my ears. When I opened my eyes, the sound of rain could still be heard through the window crack. I lay in bed for a moment with my head on the pillow. The space next to me was empty. My husband must not have returned yet from his night taxi shift. I carefully got out of bed. Standing in front of the mirror, I could see a faint mark on my cheek from yesterday. When I gently touched it with my finger, it still stung. I took foundation from the dressing table and covered the mark. The nursing home was a 30-minute bus ride away. While waiting at the rainy bus stop, my mind was already at work. I thought of the faces of the elderly I would care for today. As I boarded the bus, the smell of disinfectant stung my nose. They must sanitize the bus every morning. Outside the window, the rainy morning of Buchi and Jungdong passed by. Arriving at the nursing home, I heard the familiar smell of disinfectant and the sound of wheelchair wheels. I passed through the lobby to the changing room. My colleague Myungja was already changing into her uniform. "Unju, what happened to your face?" I answered Myungja's question with a light smile. "I just slept wrong. I'm fine." Myungja's eyes were suspicious, but she didn't ask further. A colleague of 10 years would have noticed. But we had learned to keep silent about each other's wounds. After changing into my uniform, I checked the duty log. Today I was in charge of 5 elderly people on the 2nd floor. All of them were between long-term care levels 2 and 3. "Oh, right. Unju, did you hear? They installed new CCTV in our apartment elevator." Myungja suddenly said. We lived in the same complex. My heart skipped slightly at her words. "Really? Since when?" "Since yesterday, they say. There was a notice at the management office." I nodded at Myungja's words. Yesterday's incident flashed in my mind. My cheek felt hot again. As soon as I started work, the call bell rang. Ding. It was Mrs. Kim from room 205. It was time to change her position. I walked quickly along the corridor. "Mrs. Kim, it's time to get up." I entered the room with a gentle greeting. The grandmother smiled weakly. That smile made me momentarily forget yesterday's pain. As I changed her position, rain continued to fall outside the window. Listening to the rain, she spoke. "Nurse Unju, what's wrong with your face today?" My hand stopped for a moment. No amount of foundation could deceive an elderly person's eyes, apparently. "It's nothing, ma'am. I'm just a little tired." She didn't ask further. Instead, she held my hand briefly with her wrinkled one. That warmth seeped into my heart. After finishing the morning duties, I was taking a short break. In the lounge when my phone rang. It was my daughter Ji-yoon. "Mom, are you okay?" Ji-yoon's voice was filled with concern. She must have heard about yesterday from my sister-in-law. "I'm fine, daughter. I'm always fine." It was an automatic response. But this time my voice trembled slightly. "Mom, let's stop enduring now." I asked my lawyer friend. My heart swelled at Ji-yoon's words. My 42-year-old daughter, working as a nurse, was always worried about me. "Not yet. I'll think about it some more." After ending the call, I reopened the duty log. I recorded the mark on my cheek I had discovered in the morning truthfully. The time, condition, degree of pain, all of it. It was a caregiver's habit. After finishing the afternoon shift, I headed home. It was still raining. When I arrived at the apartment and opened the mailbox, I saw a small USB among the advertisements. It was a note from Myungja on how to copy CCTV footage. I stood under my umbrella for a while. The note was written in simple handwriting. "Evidence should be collected before it disappears. You can request to view it at the management office." I clutched the rain-soaked paper in my hand. A single thought crossed my mind. Evidence. My footsteps toward home were lighter than usual. On the management office bulletin board, there was a notice about viewing CCTV footage. I woke up early in the morning. The second hand of the clock ticked in the room. My husband was sound asleep after his night driving shift. I quietly got out of bed and headed to the kitchen. I opened the drawer and took out a notepad and pen. The first thing I did was make a list. Voice recorder, CCTV, call bell logs, joint account details, family chat captures. I wrote quickly and concisely. Collecting evidence was a race against time, especially the CCTV, which had a short retention period. I went back to the kitchen drawer and took out the voice recorder. It was a small device, but it felt heavy. When I pressed the power button, a red blinking light came on. I placed it quietly on the table. I took out my phone and captured the family chat conversations. My mother-in-law's message, "A daughter-in-law should endure," my sister-in-law's message. You should make up the difference. The time and date were clear. I backed everything up to the cloud. I logged into internet banking to check the joint account details. I noticed living expenses flowing to my sister-in-law's account over the past 6 months. The amounts weren't consistent but fluctuating. I took screenshots. I called the nursing home to request the call bell logs. I said I needed them for work purposes. I needed the record from the log and duty journal, from the time when the mark appeared on my cheek. Yes, is this Nurse Han Anju? I'll print out the logs for you. I breathed a sigh of relief at the administrator's words. I could pick them up on my way home today. Looking at the clock, it was almost 8. My husband would wake up soon. I hurriedly organized my notes. I planned to visit the management office. I needed to apply to view the elevator CCTV footage. I could do it just as Myungja had instructed. I also needed to schedule a consultation at the police station. I needed to find out what procedures were required, but not to file a report yet. Just a consultation. A message alert sounded on my husband's phone. He seemed to have woken up. I poured myself a glass of water in the kitchen and drank it. Anju, I went a bit too far yesterday. My husband's voice came from the bedroom. I didn't answer. Let's just move past it today. I won't do it again. It was a familiar apology. Words I had heard many times. This time, I answered differently. No. I ended it with one word. I took out my phone and backed up all the data to the cloud once more. I also unified the file names, evidence, date, content. My husband came into the kitchen. He looked tired. I could guess what he was about to say. Mother's medication costs have gone up. We need to pay more. It was as expected. Talk of money. Instead of answering, I closed my notepad. I'm going to the police station today. My husband's face hardened at my words. It must have been an unfamiliar tone for him. What? I've decided not to tolerate violence anymore. And I have evidence. My husband's expression suddenly changed to one of confusion. The red light on the voice recorder was blinking. Are you crazy? Family matters. He couldn't finish his sentence. Because I stood up. I wasn't going to be intimidated anymore. Because we're family, there are lines that should not be crossed. My husband's face turned pale. He seemed confused by this version of me, so different from before. On my way to the nursing home, I stopped at the police station. I scheduled a consultation. The police officer was kind. If the evidence is original, it changes everything. The police officer's words echoed in my ears. On my way to work in the morning, I stopped by the management office. It was the day to receive the CCTV footage copy. The chirping of birds could be heard from the sky where the rain had stopped. The weather was different from yesterday. Are you Ms. Han Anju? I've put it on this USB for you. I received the small USB handed by the employee. It was lighter than I expected. But the weight of its contents was by no means light. Did you look at it? I asked carefully. The employee shook his head. No, I don't have that authority. I only included the footage from the date and time you requested. I breathed a sigh of relief. I put the USB in the inner pocket of my bag. As soon as I arrived at the nursing home, I looked for Myungja. She seemed to know already. I got a call yesterday. About the call bell logs, right? Myungja said in a small voice. Her eyes were full of support. Yes, thank you. You've helped me a lot. It's only natural. People like us have to help each other. My eyes grew hot at her words. But I didn't cry. Now was the time for action, not emotion. During lunch, I turned on my laptop in the office. When I connected the USB, a list of files appeared. They were video files organized by date. I could see the interior of our apartment elevator on the screen. I quickly scanned through the footage, checking the timestamps. And then that moment appeared. The image of me entering the elevator with my husband. The argument and the moment of the slap. The expressionless faces of my in-laws around us were also clear. I captured the important scenes. After finishing work, I headed to the hospital. My daughter Ji-yoon was waiting. Mom, I'll help you get a copy of your medical records. As a nurse, Ji-yoon knew the procedures well. I received copies of the medical records. Diagnosing a bruise and tension headache. A doctor's note was included. What will you do now? After thinking for a moment about Ji-yoon's question, I answered. I'm going to visit the Legal Aid Foundation. Ji-yoon handed me a note she had prepared. It was contact information for lawyer Kim Sora at the Legal Aid Foundation. She's my college classmate. She handles a lot of domestic violence cases. I thanked Ji-yoon for her help. Then I called immediately. Fortunately, a consultation was possible tomorrow morning. In the evening, I met lawyer Kim Sora at a small cafe. I showed her the evidence I had collected one by one. You've prepared very systematically. The lawyer's words made me smile bitterly. I guess my habits as a caregiver had helped. I'll attach labels to the evidence and create a timeline. Lawyer Kim verified the call. Bell logs and the time when the bruise was photographed. The timestamps matched exactly. With this, we can sufficiently prove the fact of violence. Relief flooded over me. I wasn't alone anymore. I'll also ask Myungja for a witness statement. I nodded at the lawyer's advice. My colleague Myungja had already expressed her willingness to help. On my way out after the consultation, I suddenly went back into the cafe. I ordered a latte. As I took the first sip, the trembling in my hands stopped. When I returned home, my husband was waiting on the sofa. He looked tired. Where have you been? There was irritation in his questioning voice. Without answering, I headed to the room. Later, looking at my husband's sleeping form, I covered him with a blanket. His sleeping face was peaceful. Sometimes he would mutter, "I'm sorry." His humanity hadn't completely disappeared. But now I knew how to distinguish between kindness and responsibility. Late at night, my phone rang. It was my sister-in-law. When I checked, I saw that an edited video had been uploaded to the family chat. My phone rang incessantly from the morning. The family chat was bustling with the video uploaded by my sister-in-law. When I turned on the screen and checked, I was dismayed. It was CCTV footage, but a version with key scenes deleted. "Mom, check this out." A text from Ji-yoon arrived. Looking closely, it was really cunning. The scene where my husband hit me had completely disappeared, leaving only parts where I raised my voice. I hurriedly contacted lawyer Kim Sora. After explaining the situation, a quick reply came. "You have the original footage, right? We can authenticate the original with metadata and hash values." I was relieved by the lawyer's words. I didn't understand the technical details, but I was confident that the truth would be revealed. "I heard there's a gathering at your in-laws today. What are you going to do?" After thinking for a moment about Ji-yoon's question, I made up my mind. I have to go. I can't avoid it now. The family gathering started at 3 in the afternoon. The living room was already filled with my mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and some relatives. My husband said he would come late. "Mother, hello." When I greeted her, my mother-in-law just nodded coldly. My sister-in-law had a triumphant expression, probably because of the edited video. "Mrs. Unju, you seem to be under a lot of stress these days," one of the relatives said. The video must have been circulating in the family chat. Instead of answering, I took out my laptop. I connected the projector I had brought. Everyone looked puzzled. "I have something to show you." My voice trembled, but my resolve was firm. I turned on the laptop and played the original video and audio files simultaneously. The living room instantly fell silent. The deleted scene was clear in the original video. The slap sound and the moment my husband's hand struck my cheek. And the expressionless faces of the in-laws. The recording also contained everyday conversations. My sister-in-law's voice demanding living expenses, my mother-in-law's words, "endure," and my husband's threats. As the video ended, my husband opened the front door and entered. His face hardened as he sensed the atmosphere. "What's going on?" My husband's trembling voice broke the silence. No one answered. The expressions of the relatives had changed. Standing up, I spoke slowly. "As of today, I'm filing for a protection order." My sister-in-law jumped up. "What are you doing? Taking family matters outside?" Instead of answering, I showed her my phone. It was a message confirming that I had already submitted the originals to the police. I also posted a legal notice in the family chat. My mother-in-law struck the floor with her cane. "I raised you. What are you doing?" Despite her shouting, I no longer shrank back. The looks around me were changing. The relatives looked at each other with awkward expressions. "Mother, I am also a person with patience. But I cannot tolerate violence." My sister-in-law's expression hardened. Ji-yoon didn't miss the moment, capturing and recording it. My husband sat down on the sofa wordlessly. It was an appearance I had never seen before. He looked powerless and small. The family gathering ended early. Everyone left with awkward goodbyes. After the front door closed, my husband spoke in a trembling voice. "Are you really going to do this?" I nodded. "Yes, it's already started." On my way out, I met my colleague Myungja. She seemed to know already. She gave me a warm hug. "Stop enduring now. You've endured for too long." Tears welled up at Myungja's words. But I didn't cry. This was just the beginning. On my way back home, there was an envelope in the mailbox. It seemed prepared by my husband. It contained debt records and transfer receipts. The next morning, my husband was sitting at the kitchen table. He seemed to have woken up earlier than usual. Dark circles had settled heavily under his eyes. He must not have slept all night. "Would you like a cup of coffee?" Surprisingly, my husband spoke first. His voice was different from usual. I nodded cautiously. 2 cups of coffee were placed on the table. Steam slowly rose, filling the morning air. The sound of birds chirping could be heard beyond the window. "I have something to say." There was determination in my husband's voice. It was a serious expression I had never seen before. I waited silently. Night taxi income has plummeted. Since COVID, passengers are less than half. My husband slowly began to talk. I could feel the realistic difficulties. Mother's hospital bills keep increasing, and there's also old debt. My husband's confession continued. It was the story of debt he had been hiding. He was in a state of loans from 3 places. "Now I understand where you've been venting your anger." I spoke calmly. A flash of surprise crossed my husband's eyes. He probably didn't expect me to understand so easily. "But Do-hyun, while I understand the circumstances, you must take responsibility for violence and embezzlement." I spoke with a firm voice. I no longer hesitated. My husband hung his head. What should I do? It was a powerless question. It was a side of my husband I had never seen before. I explained it simply. Lawyer Kim is simultaneously pursuing property division, compensation, and return of unjust enrichment. My husband's eyes widened. Return of unjust enrichment? The living expenses that went to your sister's account. All the circumstances have been revealed. I showed the evidence one by one. Transfer details to my sister-in-law's account. Coercive messages, everything was clear. "Missian did that?" Anger mixed in my husband's voice. It seemed he hadn't known the fact until now. "Yes, a significant amount of living expenses went to your sister's account every month." There was pressure too. My husband was silent for a while. He let out a deep sigh, staring out the window. "What does mother think?" I asked carefully. I was curious about my mother-in-law's reaction. Mother just cried. She said, my words were like knives. My heart ached at my husband's answer. It seemed my mother-in-law had her own regrets. Lawyer Kim suggested this method too. I showed the documents I had prepared. They contained content about my husband, taking anger management and domestic violence prevention programs. Why should I? Stopping mid-sentence and thinking, my husband nodded. "Okay, I'll do it." Surprisingly, it was a voluntary agreement. An unexpected change. Apologies should be shown through actions, not words. I spoke seriously. My husband bowed his head deeply. We also drew up a debt repayment plan together. We clearly distinguished between my husband's share and my sister-in-law's return portion. We also detailed the amounts and schedule. If we organize like this, we can pay off all the debt within 3 years. My husband examined the document closely and then signed. He also promised notarization. Just as I was about to get up, a text message arrived on my phone. It was a message about a temporary protection order from the court. My steps were light as I left the courthouse. In my hand was a temporary protection order. Now my husband's approach and contact were officially restricted. The property division mediation schedule was also set. I met lawyer Kim Sora on the courthouse steps. Her expression was bright. Things are progressing more smoothly than expected. I breathed a sigh of relief at the lawyer's words. I was fortunate to have expert help. Next is the property division mediation, right? Yes, we'll discuss the deposit for the lease, appliances, and rights to the store under your husband's name. I took notes as I listened to the lawyer's explanation. I had to be thorough. I entered the cafe where I was supposed to meet Ji-yoon. My daughter was already seated. "Mom, how did it go?" I smiled at my daughter's concerned voice. I showed her the temporary protection order. "That's great. Now Dad can't contact you as he pleases." I could feel my daughter's relief. Ji-yoon had always been on my side. What about your sister-in-law? I took out the unjust enrichment return agreement at Ji-yoon's question. My sister-in-law had finally surrendered to the evidence. Wow, you're amazing, Mom. Ji-yoon's admiration made me feel both embarrassed and proud. It was my first victory in defending myself. The next day, I also sent an official document to the taxi company. It notified them of my husband's educational program and the access restriction. The company replied that they would cooperate. I also sorted out the issue of my mother-in-law's care. I no longer had a duty to support her as a daughter-in-law. Instead, I organized a rotation system for care workers. Professional care was needed. I also started looking for a new home. I went around real estate agencies for lease contracts. It took time to find a place I liked. How about this house? It gets good sunlight and is quiet. I looked around the new house at the real estate agent's words. It was small but cozy. Most importantly, I could contract it in my name. I like it. I'll take it. I made the decision. I immediately completed the moving in registration. I also checked to prevent fake registrations. I finally had my own space. I maintained my work at the nursing home. Work was my identity and fulfillment. However, I adjusted the work schedule to manage my physical strength. I put up a nameplate on the new house's entrance. Han Unju. Seeing a nameplate with just my name brought a new feeling. Though I had lived for 68 years. This was the first home with only my name on it. I attached a small sticker to the voice recorder in the drawer. Always on my side. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say this small device had changed my life. As evening fell, my phone rang. It was my husband, but due to the protection order, a call was impossible. Instead, a text message came. I was at the front of your new house. I didn't go in. I'll just leave the deposit receipt in the mailbox. I didn't reply. Looking outside, I could see my husband standing in front of the store. He was holding a deposit receipt with his head bowed. I could see him trying to keep his promises on his own. It was a small change, but a meaningful start. It was the day the first compensation was deposited. A cool breeze had been blowing since the morning. Fresh air entered the room as I opened the window. As I was brewing coffee in the kitchen, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, my husband was standing there. It was the first time I had faced him since the temporary protection order. His face had become much thinner. "May I come in?" he asked cautiously. After considering for a moment, I nodded. I was no longer afraid. Sitting in the living room, my husband presented the first compensation deposit confirmation. It showed his willingness to keep his promises faithfully. "You were right. An apology isn't words, it's actions." My husband's voice was solemn. I could feel the change. "I'm also taking anger management education. I'm learning a lot." I nodded and handed him coffee. We couldn't return to the past. But I could acknowledge the effort each was making in their place. I took out a kimchi sample from the refrigerator and handed it to my husband. It was something I had made recently. "This is a trade. Kimchi for compensation." It was a small joke, but tears welled up in my husband's eyes. Who could have known our relationship would change like this? "Thank you." After a brief conversation, my husband left. I watched his back through the window. His shoulders had become much more stooped. In the afternoon, there was an unexpected visitor. It was my mother-in-law. She seemed to have come with a care worker. "May I come in?" My mother-in-law's voice was smaller than usual. The appearance of an elderly person was more strongly felt. I invited her in. "I'll make you a cup of tea." While I was preparing the tea, my mother-in-law looked around the living room. She seemed to like the new house. Even at my age, I'm still learning. There are things to learn at my age too. I was surprised by my mother-in-law's words. It was an unexpected confession. "You've raised me all this time, Mother." I answered calmly. Tears welled up in my mother-in-law's eyes. "I'm sorry. I taught you wrong." I accepted my mother-in-law's apology. We can't change the past, but we can change our current relationship. The radio announced monsoon rain news. The smell of rain from the first scene came back to me. The memory of that day when everything started was clear. I opened the drawer and took out the voice recorder. The red blinking light was still flashing. It didn't seem necessary anymore. I pressed the power button to turn it off and put it back in the drawer. It was the end of self-protection, the beginning of self-life. I organized the evidence I had collected in Chapter 3 one by one. Voice recorder, CCTV, call bell logs, account details, family chat captures. All these had become my life's safety net. The me who didn't close the drawer that day opened my life. I whispered to myself. The courage to take the first step had led to this peace. The next day, my way to the nursing home felt lighter than usual. My heart for caring for patients seemed to have grown warmer as well. "Nurse Unju, you look different today." I smiled at Mrs. Kim's words. I must have changed without realizing it. As the call bell rang and I held the hands of the elderly, I thought, these hands that care for others now know how to care for myself too. Dignity ultimately begins with protecting oneself. Paying off my husband's debt, responding to my sister-in-law's demands, unconditionally. Following my mother-in-law's words, none of these were my duty. Warm spring rain tapped on the window. Now I was no longer afraid of that sound. Rather, it seemed to herald a new beginning. When the rain clears, the heart dries before the ground. Looking out the window, I thought, writing my name on the duty roster today, I once again confirmed that I am the owner of my life.